I spent a lot of my career at Forrester, sitting beside the person that authored The Death of the Salesman,
Mhm.
authored this
Yeah.
interview. If I had
Yeah.
to harken back 20 years at one of these major technological events that you mentioned, is when Google, became 81% of the start of every customer journey. Whether you're buying a car, any considered purchase, whether you're buying $1 million worth of software, 81% of buyers relied on a Google search. So, what happened, the ether, what you talk about and all the things, no, and whole industries were created. The 15,000 MarTech and AdTech tools I mentioned, half of them were engineered on how to get to the first 10 listings on the front page of Google.
Sure.
Entire careers were formed, entire university courses and degrees were created. And now the world just doesn't, the buyer, I totally agree with you, by the way, on the buyer agent side. 75% of the new majority buyer as of January this year, demographics say the majority buyer is now born after 1982. So we do have a millennial led buyer. 75% of them don't want to talk to a human. So they're going to build these better and better buyer bots and buyer agents that work on their behalf that are so much better than a Google search. I don't want 10 listings that I have to go listen to podcasts and read ebooks. I mean, you go do that for me and you
Right.
accelerate a lot of these 28 moments. But in its how it's consumed, and you talked about stratifying, you talked about reading the internet cover to cover. I worked at IBM when we played Jeopardy, played Ken Jennings, and we only had milliseconds to read the internet cover to cover before we had to answer, Alex Trebek in the form of a question. This AI and how it's formed and how it's built, there's going to be a counter force of how
Mhm.
it consumes information and then how it lists, the different things. So, jobs that we don't know exist yet, careers and university degrees that don't
Yep.
exist yet are on the counterforce of these buyer agents and how companies are going to, over the next 3, 5, and 10 years, going to respond to how these agents
Yeah,
move.
no, I agree with that. I just think that like one of the things that is so important today for today's buyer, right, is the issue of risk,
Mhm.
right? None of the stuff, Google, et cetera, right, gave you any insight into relative risk, right? And that is actually where the interaction of AI agents and other things, right, that some of which have not even come yet. Um, that's where that's going to be so important. And it's where also I'm taking this perspective because I operate in an area of causal AI, right? And so this is kind of like from a vendor perspective, everything you're trying to accomplish against to achieve this particular outcome, net of all this stuff in the middle that you don't control, one of which is the buyer obsession with risk, right? How do you deal with that? It's expressed today in longer and longer buying journeys, number of deals closed with no decision. I mean, it's endless, right? And so I think that this is where the companies that I'm aware of that are using buyer bots, for example, are saying evaluate what all these vendors are saying out there about themselves and put it on a factual index, right? Tell us who we can really at least trust the quality of their information. And are they saying things that actually are executable, are real, are in production, right? Things like that. And so I think that's just in the short term, that's where it's really, really going. The problem is that all the stuff that Salesforce is doing, I'm not picking on Salesforce,
Yep.
isn't about that. It's about glorified errand boys.